If you or a family member have been hurt because of the careless actions of another person, call Walker, Texas Lawyer. They'll work to get you the financial compensation and justice you deserve. They have 40 years of experience, and you don't pay unless you win. Call 713-881-9653 today for a consultation or go to walkertexaslawyer.com.
Oh, Brad, what have you done now?
Broadcasting live from Houston, Texas, and around the world. TV host, best-selling author, and radio personality Brad Gilmore brings you a collection of conversations with stars from movies.
Mark Wahlberg.
Hey, how are you?
The legendary Mr. Christopher Lloyd. Christopher, how are we doing?
I'm doing good. Great introduction.
Television.
Jimmy Fallon joins us this morning. Jimmy, how you doing, my friend?
Good morning. Thank you so much, Brad, for having me. I appreciate this, bud.
Kelly Ripa.
Brad, thank you for having me.
Comedy.
Jay Leno joins us. Jay, how you doing?
Hey, Brad, what's going on?
Gabriel Fluffy Iglesias.
Good morning.
Music.
Lola Monroe.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
The legendary frontman of AC/DC, Brian Johnson, joins us right now. Brian, how you doing?
Good morning, Brad. What looking to talk, you me funny lad.
Grammy Award winner Maya joins us.
How are you?
And more. This is The Collection. Now your host, The Boat, Brad Gilmore.
And he's joining me right now on the Spotlight. He is the author of Welcome to Houston, Hip Hop, Heritage in Hustle Town. The author joins us right now. Langston, how are you?
I'm good, man. I'm chilling. Good to see you all.
Good to see you, man. Congratulations on the book, first and foremost. And let's dive in. Give the people a little bit of background on yourself and what led you to wanting to write Welcome to Houston.
Yeah, well, I have a PhD in folklore and ethnomusicology from Indiana University, and this project began as my doctoral dissertation. So I'm from Houston, I'm a native Houstonian. And so I went back to Houston about 10 years ago to do a deep study of the local hip hop scene. And so out of that came a dissertation. And for the last 10 years, I've been working on transforming that dissertation into a book. So there's the academic part, but also I'm a big hip hop fan, a big Houston hip hop fan. So it's the love for hip hop in Houston that also helped produce this book.
So growing up in the city, what part of town were you growing up in?
The South Side. I grew up mostly in Hiram Clark. That's where I've lived since middle school. So that's kind of where I'm from. That's what I represent.
And who were your guys? Like, who would you listen to? What Houston artists from a young age would you listen to?
Oh, first off, the Ghetto Boys, for sure. The Ghetto Boys, remain my favorite hip hop group of all time. That's what got me into hip hop. So Scarface, Willie D, Bushwick Bill, Big Mike, all of them. But also, I love Screwed Up Click, Mike D, Zero, all them folks. And I don't know, I have a general love for Houston too, man. In general, Slim Thug, all of them. That's kind of cliched, but I love most artists that come out of Houston because they definitely represent my experience. So yeah, and Devin to do it. Let me make sure to shout him out too, because that's one of my favorite artists of all time.
So let's go to the dissertation. When putting the dissertation together, I know you came down to Houston. This is about a decade ago. And at that time, the underground hip hop scene was thriving in this city. You had several major artists really doing a lot of quality work. Some of them are referenced in the book, be it D. Risha, Kyle Hubbard, Thurgood Wordsmith, a lot of people who are good friends of mine who I remember back in the day just making a lot of noise. What do you remember about the scene at that time?
Oh, it was buzzing, man. I went to Houston not fully knowing about the underground scene, even though I'm a big underground hip hop fan in general. Most of what I knew about Houston was, the screwed up artists and folks like that. And so it was amazing to, hit up Turning Heads and see this whole world of artists from different backgrounds. I saw you there too. This whole world of artists from different backgrounds coming to this Houston hip hop scene from different aspects of culture and artistic identity and everything. So it was just a fertile playground for music making. That's what I remember. And, that's why I said, hey, this has to be part of the book, even though I didn't go in there looking for that.
And you hit on it in the book, and you just mentioned it partially there. Houston not only is the most diverse city in the United States, but the music scene is diverse from different cultural backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, the racial makeup, even the sexual orientation. It's all over the place. What about the diversity of Houston do you think lends itself to the quality and the output of the genre hip hop in the city?
Yeah, I think there's a direct connection. I think, as you mentioned, Houston's the most diverse city in the nation. And even though there's this dominant cultural identity, which I talk about in the book, if you break that down a bit, folks are coming from it from all different respects. So you get to see people's individual and cultural backgrounds, directly connected to this larger hip hop identity. And that's why, the music sounds so rooted in Houston, but also so diverse at the same time. And I think it's like the perfect mix of, general local identity, but also people are bringing their different flavors to it. So it's, I'm biased because I'm from Houston, but I think it's, the most interesting hip hop music out there for those reasons.
Well, every region, in the hip hop or any music for that matter, every region in the United States has their own dialect that and words and culture that they discuss in the music and describe sometimes in great and vivid detail. But Houston has a very specific set of vernacular and certain colloquialisms that if you're from Houston, you understand like you grow up with it. If you're outside, it does take some explaining. You spend a little time talking about, or not a little time, but you spend time talking about the slab culture and other things. Do you play music from Houston for other people and say, okay, let me explain what still tipping on faux vogues actually means?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't like directly done that, but I presented this work all over the country at this point, and much of my conversations are rooted in just helping folks understand, the deep cultural nuances that are reflected in the music, and so yeah, sometimes it's hard to translate, you know, but I think that's what's dope about Houston hip hop is that it's like made for Houstonians and it's like looking inward where if you step outside of Houston other regions it's looking outward like it's mass marketed, it's for everybody, which is dope too, but for whatever reason, and I talk about in the book, yeah, Houston hip hop is made for Houstonians. It's just so dope that other people can connect to it.
There was a time in the mid 2000s where Houston music was mainstream. We're talking '05, '06, '07, maybe even the beginnings of '08, where artists were regularly going platinum. You had people like Mike Jones, who I think his album went 2 times platinum, Chamillionaire's winning a Grammy, Paul Wall's working on major albums from major artists. What about in your expertise, why during that time do you think that Houston found this mainstream success that had eluded them for the decades prior? Sorry.
My fault. Oh, yeah. No, great question. I talk about that moment a little bit in the book. I think there was several things going on. One, I think there was just a general change in the larger national hip hop landscape where communities and fans all over the country and world were looking for different sounds. So outside of Houston, you had like Oakland popping, right? You had Atlanta, really taking over the game. All that was happening at the same time. So the door was kind of open for regional sounds, more than it was prior. But also, and I talk about this a little bit, but something like Pimp My Ride, which was on MTV around that time, really focused on, car culture and like kind of the weirdness of hip hop, right? And I think, Houston hip hop being so car centric, custom car centric, and connecting that with the music, it was able to kind of walk in that space that was created by MTV and Pimp My Ride. I think that was an important part of it as well. And I think most dominant regional scenes have their time in the limelight, right? And I think that was Houston's moment. Well, one of their moments, right? I think it's going to come around again, and it happened before that, in like around '91 when the Ghetto Boys popped. But I think, yeah, for those different reasons, just I think hip hop fans around the country were looking for something different, and Houston really gave them something different and interesting.
Now, for myself, growing up in this city, chopped and screwed music ushered in by DJ Screw, and you mentioned the Screwed Up Click a minute ago. It's just a part of the fabric and the DNA of the city. Why do you feel as though that sound connected so much with this city and is synonymous with Houston? And we still, like, I know people who are like, hey, did you listen to the new Travis Scott album? I'm not going to listen to it until OG Ron and Candlestick take their pass at it. Like, I'll listen to the slowed
Sure.
down version until, I mean, I just don't. Why do you think that we're so embedded with it? What about it?
Yeah, a few things. I think, just the natural Houston environment being so hot all the time, and you're here right now, so you get that, right? It makes you move slow. Everything's a little bit muddier, right? And I think like the sheer sound of the music kind of connected with that. But also, I mean, being so hyper local. I mean, Screwed music, especially when it came out, was about these particular Houston neighborhoods and Houston streets. And then we talked about the vernacular. Everything was so deeply Houston. I think it gave Houstonians and Houston hip hop fans something to connect to, right? I mean, it really documented our experiences. And also at the same time, hip hop in general is about place, it's about representing where you're from, right? And I think nationally, having a sound that comes from your hometown that reverberates and is important nationally and transnationally, that's inspiring for local fans too. And so for all those different reasons, I think the Screwed music is still popping because it represents place both on a local level and a national level.
I want to ask a process question regarding putting the
Mhm.
book itself together. I'm always fascinated by everyone's writing process. It's different. I know for myself, when I worked on my first book project, I sat in a room by myself for days on end and just nailed out a manuscript and said I never want to do that again in my life, and
Right.
then ended up inevitably doing it again. But I think that that's probably a similar writer's journey that maybe you had. But how was the process of putting this book together?
Long and hard. And at this point, yeah, never want to do this again, though I have to. No, yeah, I mean, the first draft came out over the course of several months. I just dedicated every day to just sitting and writing and hammering this draft out. But then I spent the last 10 years just transforming it in different ways and writing different drafts and, you know, pulling things in and taking things out. And so there was this initial burst, and then over time there was just careful, you know, kind of editing, right, and repurposing and reformatting whenever I had time because I was working a full time job. And so, yeah, it was a mix of just spending dedicated time to also finding little spots of inspiration and spots where I can just work while I'm also working on other stuff. So, yeah,
That
long process.
they say writers are also the worst editors. Would you find a time was it difficult for you to take things out that you've carefully crafted over years?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, it certainly was because I felt like that first draft captured everything that I needed, everything that I wanted in this book. But working with different folks that I trust, working with the staff at the University of Illinois, I think they did help me craft something that's both really, enjoyable to read, I hope, but also informative. So yeah, it was rough, but I think it worked out in the end.
Yeah, it's always what is something that you touched on in the book in the original manuscript that perhaps did not make it to the final draft?
Oh, lots of stuff. I got more into kind of my own personal history with in Houston and with the music. Also, and I'm glad they made me remove this stuff. You know, this was a doctoral dissertation, so I got deep into like place theory and all this weird stuff that no one really cares about in the real world. But I worked for a long time to craft out those theories, so it's important to me, but no one else cares about it. But if you want to read that stuff, it's in the dissertation. But yeah, a lot of that
What
theory
is
got
place
removed,
theory?
thankfully. Oh my goodness. Just theories of place and space. I it's even hard for me to rattle it off right now, but just looking at how, place isn't just these physical landscapes, right? It's also constructed mentally, right? And so place is, the space that move in, right? But also your relationship to those spaces. And so I kind of crafted out, that part and then um, theorized about spaces like the hood and, the streets and the scene, hip hop scene, all that was in the dissertation, but it was a little too much for a commercial book, you know.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because Marshall McLuhan, who is a famous communication theorist,
Hmm.
famously said the medium is the message. And I think a lot of the times when we talk about Houston itself, Houston, the city, really is the medium, and it dictates the message in which we use to connect with other people. And I think that it's not only a muse, but it is a channel for getting out our thoughts and our opinions and the observations that we make of our environment. Would you agree?
Yeah, did you say Houston was the medium? That's
Yes.
pretty. That's pretty heavy. I would agree. I'd have to think about that a little more and also steal it because that I wish I had that before I wrote the book. But yeah, yeah, it's weird because I feel like even though it took a time to write this book, right, and it was based on field work out in Houston and talking to artists and talking to fans and everything. Just growing up in Houston, I felt like I already had the knowledge to write this book, right? Because I mean, Houston is such a, obviously it's culture and we walk in it every day and we're not actively thinking about it, but it's so rich that, growing up there, you kind of know what's going on, right? You know that, these places and spaces are super important to you, because it's part of your identity as you move through space. The Houston hip hop you connect to in part because it represents where you're from and all that, right? And so in some ways the book was already written before I even sat down and tried to write it because it was my experience, right? So the process of writing it was really just taking time to, making sure that I talked to other folks and got their experiences and thoughts about it, and also figuring out how to translate that experience to folks who weren't from the city.
Now, when talking to people from the city, in doing a lot of your field work, as you just mentioned, was there a particular conversation that you had with any particular person that really struck you as, wow, that was a great convo that I had. I'm so glad I took the time to talk to such and such.
Oh, so many of them. Yeah. The Aspiring Me, right? Who is the son of Big Mello, and who I'm a big fan of. I mean, we had an incredible, long, maybe 2-hour conversation at some coffee shop, and he just gave me his whole personal history, how he, kind of grapples with being a unique artist, but also dealing with his father's immense legacy, also dealing with like this serious cultural identity in Houston while also trying to make his own kind of music. It was such an incredible conversation and one of the most memorable ones for me, excuse me. But all of those conversations were dope. I mean, D. Risha was probably the first interview I had, and we sat there, I think, at the Galleria Mall, just chopping it up for 2 hours, talking about our collective fandom for MF Doom, but also, of course, his artistry. It was dope. I talked to Big Pokey, rest in peace, outside of Yates High School. It was a short conversation, about 15, 20 minutes, but I mean, just memorable. I talked to Gangsta Nip sitting in his car in a Walgreens parking lot in the Southwest side. That was weird, but so dope. So anyway, yeah, all those conversations, I remember them. I mean, I have such a strong memory of them, even though it was 10 years ago, because those folks really welcomed me into their world and really opened up in really deep ways. We didn't just talk about music, we talked about their life story. Some of those stories are, pretty rough, pretty hard. And I really was honored that they would share them with me. And so just shout out to all those maybe 30 artists that I talked to for this thing because they really they helped make the book. They wrote the book. I just translated the stories.
Oh, that's beautiful, man. The book is called Welcome to Houston, Hip Hop Heritage in Hustle Town. You can get it. Where all can we get it? We can get it on Amazon, which is where I got my copy. Where else can people
Yeah,
find it?
sweet. Amazon, of course, you can get it direct from the University of Illinois Press. You can get it through Barnes and Noble, and you can order it through your local bookstores. Do support your local bookstores. So, yeah, all over the place if you want to order it. I think it might be in stock in Barnes and Nobles in Houston. I did see
And one final question, actually. Hip Hop Heritage in Hustle Town, the subtitle. Explain that to me.
that. Yeah, so the original title was something far more not marketable. So the University of Illinois Press came back to me and we're like, hey, we want to call it Welcome to Houston, but we need something after colon. And so I'm like, what is it, right? And so I knew I wanted to get heritage in there because that's what I was writing about. The Hustle Town, I think at some point I saw an Astros T-shirt that said Hustle Town, And I'm like, okay, there it is. And then I knew there was some music that called Houston that, so I just put it all together, and there it is. Mostly marketing, you know how that goes.
But it makes sense. I mean, because when you think about the origins of some of the artists going, the legendary stories of ESG selling 1 million copies before,
Right.
just out of the trunk of his car to people in the city, going platinum before a major label. I mean, there's no one, I think, that embodies the hustler attitude and mentality than the artists in the city of Houston. Langston, man, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. And congrats on the book. I love it. I suggest everybody go out there, buy your copy wherever you can find it. Welcome to Houston. Thanks so much, man.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Hurry up, tape running out.